the new year with stories and happenings that made headlines over the weekend. Well, it was an eventful start of the year for South Africa as they buried an icon, the Archbishop Desmond Tutu. But the next day, they had to battle a massive fire that damaged the Parliament houses in Cape Town.
On Saturday, South Africa bade farewell to late Archbishop Desmond Tutu at a state funeral. The service took place in Cape Town St. George Cathedral, where for years he preached against racial injustice. Tutu was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1984 for his non-violent opposition to white minority rule, died last Sunday aged 90. Delivering the main eulogy, President Cyril Ramaphosa lauded the anti-apartheid hero as a crusader in the struggle for freedom.
Archbishop Desmond Tutu has been our moral compass, but he's also been our national conscience. Even after the advent of democracy, he did not hesitate to draw attention, often harshly, to our shortcomings as leaders of the democratic state.
Ramaphosa then handed over the national flag to Tutu's widow, Nomalizo Leah, known as Mama Leah. She sat in a wheelchair in the front row of the congregation, draped in a purple scarf, the color of her husband's clerical robes. Tutu's body was cremated and then his ashes interred behind the cathedral's pulpit in a private ceremony. The next day, Sunday, there was a fire at the South African Parliament, causing extensive damage, collapsing the roof and gutting an entire floor in one building, with firefighters partially containing the blaze after several hours. Still on Sunday, Sudan's Doctors' Committee said security forces killed 2 people during protests against military rule. According to the Central Committee of Sudanese Doctors, a total of 56 people have been killed in protests since a coup on October 25th. The committee said the first man was in his 20s and died of injuries to the head in the capital, Khartoum, while the second man died of gunshots to the chest and abdomen. Sunday was the 12th round of major protests since the coup. Security forces fired tear gas at demonstrators in Khartoum as protesters marched towards the presidential palace.
To our main stories for today, Sudan's Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok has resigned after another day of mass protest rocked the capital Khartoum, where thousands marched against the recent deal he had done to share power with the army, who staged a coup in October. Well, the protesters have been calling for a return to full civilian rule, but military forces again responded with force on Sunday, leaving 2 people dead. Mr. Hamdok's decision to quit now leaves the army in full control. Now, this is seen as another blow to Sudan's fragile attempts to a transition to democratic rule after a popular uprising led to the overthrow of the long-time authoritarian president Omar al-Bashir in 2019. Well, joining us now is the VOA's reporter from the Africa News Center in neighboring Kenya, Mohammed Yusuf, for more on what's happening in Sudan. Hello, Mohammed. It's a precarious situation at this time in the country. Many would say they saw this resignation coming. Well, how are citizens reacting to this?
Well, there's a mixed reaction here coming from the people. And some of the things we have observed in the country is people feel that they were questioning the kind of power Hamdok was going to have after being reinstated in November. And the protests continued. Of course, people are not happy with the military. But now with Hamdok taking power, it means that a big problem is waiting the country. The country is now going to be engulfed in more political problems. That is so far what people are saying on the ground. But again, Mohammed leaving now, which means that the military are the ones who are attacked. And now more questions are being now asked how military will move forward, because the plan was to have a military rule and also a civilian coming together and building a system that will work and also will work on 2023. And that now seems to be out. It might not work at the moment. And how the military approaches the question now.
Well, you know, like you said, Prime Minister Amdok is out now, and this leaves the army fully in charge. What does this mean now for the transitional plan of the country?
It tells a very critical story here, that because al-Bashir was in charge of his government before he was ousted in 2019, he was in charge for 30 years. He was military, and that structure is still there. That's a very strong structure. It's very difficult. Hamdok, as a neutral person, not a politician, an economist, tried his best and he couldn't succeed. And that shows that this is going to be a very tough war and a very tough situation for the Sudan itself. Pushing a military that has been there for 30 years, the structure itself is not going to be easy. But now, of course, the Hamdok now living is going to create a situation where those people who are supporting that government because of Hamdok, now his support is going to prison. That is one thing that experts have observed. But so far, again, by the look of the Sudan itself, the question now is how will the military approach and what sort of government now is going to be set. But again, the South Sudanese themselves are not happy with the political parties. They will want someone who is a technical, suggesting someone like Hamdok, who is neutral, who is kind of different to push that position. But again, it's something that's going to be seen. But what we understand so far is that political parties in Sudan, politicians, are trying to come together and form a united front to confront the military. And that is something that I think many people are watching. And now there will be an option here. The technocrats, all the guys who have been in politics for 20 years. And I think the options here.
All right, then. Thank you, Mohammed Yusuf, VOA's reporter in Nairobi. Well, we'll continue our conversation on Sudan. Joining us now here in the studio is Achike Chude, African Affairs Analyst, for more on this. Thank you so much for joining us on the program, and Happy New Year to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and Happy New Year to you too.
Well, we're starting this year with Sudan, the resignation of the Prime Minister, which many will say they saw coming. But now it looks like it's a tough one for the country, just like you heard the journalists say there. Many are also seeing it as a big blow to the military. What do you think?
Yeah, well, of course, a blow to the military, because that was the last vestige of pretense, if I use that expression, that would give the impression that there is a hierarchical arrangement between the military and the civilians. Of course, you know that from the moment that al-Bashir was overthrown by the military, the Sudanese people had made it very clear from the very beginning that they want Sudan to be run by civilians. You know, and so they have been opposed to the incursion of the military into the politics of Sudan.
Yeah.
And that is why the military has continued to be under pressure from the civilians in Sudan. And so it's going to be difficult for the military to manage the situation, because what you now have is that there is no semblance of any participation or partnership between the Sudanese military and then the civilians represented by Hamdok. Now what you have is a full-blown military dictatorship. And so I would guess that as a result of that too, the position of the Sudanese people is going to change, because the dynamics have changed. And so we are going to have heightened engagement against the military, military usurpers in Sudan. And that would also likely lead to reprisal actions by the military. And then you're going to have, ultimately, at the end of the day, more people being killed. The military is going to be very worried. I do not think that they want this situation to persist. They do not want to leave power, and then they do not want to accede to the demand of the civilians. And therefore, you're going to continue to have some level of conflict unless something gives, ultimately, at the end of the day. How they are going to appease the people, I think, is a very difficult situation.
Indeed, because Prime Minister Hamdok was kind of what they wanted to use to appease the people that, okay, this is a civilian Prime Minister in charge. And just like you said, there's no more partnership. Who now is representing the people? But like the journalist said, I don't know if you heard him, he was saying there's now going to be a coalition. The political parties and stakeholders are trying to form something. So what would help Sudan, come back on track? Because
no, but the issue is, I mean, what kind of coalition will be put in place? For instance, that would appease the Sudanese people is going to be difficult. The politicians are not exactly trusted so much by the people. Perhaps if the transition had been completed and then they go to the polls, then the people themselves should be able to elect the people that would represent them, and that would, to some extent, stave off some of the crisis that is ongoing, that's ongoing in the Sudan. But that is not the case. And again, for the military to have thought really that the continuous participation of Hamdok would legitimize their stay in power, to a very large extent, did not understand the dynamics playing out in Sudan and did not understand their people. The people do not want any vestige of a military rule in the governance of Sudan, and they have made it very, very clear. Now, who is going to emerge is going to be a problem, because you have, even before now, the agreement that Hamdok had with the military when he was overthrown in October and brought back. He had an arrangement
with them,
with them.
And that was even the deal that made, the protests continue.
Exactly, because the people did not like that protest. They wanted the military out of power. And if you, remember the Hamdok's departure speech, he said every attempt to reconcile the people and the military, to build a consensus, the kind of consensus that is needed, to move Sudan into the paths of justice, peace, equity, and so on, have failed. And that he had really had no other role to play because, people were being killed and under his watch.
That's true. Well, for them, January 1st, New Year Day, they actually marked their 66th year of independence, but it seems and it looks like there's little to celebrate. Are there lessons to be learned, by other nations who are facing this similar political crisis? I'm talking about Mali, Guinea.
Well, I think pre-coup lessons. We should be talking about pre-coup lessons. Then, I mean, lessons after the coups and then all the attempts to resolve the contradiction of the coup, like what ECOWAS has been doing for quite some time. But if there's a lesson to learn, really, it is, and a lot of people, a lot of analysts are not focusing on that. And that is the fact that the civilian experiment in the continent seems not to have worked out well. And you see, what has led or what leads to coup plotting and coup making in West Africa or other parts of Africa, like we see in Sudan, has been the failure of governance, has been the failure of the political actors who have been given the mandate to govern and to provide a better life for the people, and they have failed abysmally with corruption and economic issues and so on that they have not been able to tackle. These are the roadmap to military coups. These are the things that make it possible for the military to find any legitimate argument or any argument of any kind in taking over political power. So if there's a lesson to be learned, it is a lesson that African leaders should learn, that there's a reason why the people put them in power. It is not for self-aggrandizement. It is to work to make sure, to work assiduously to make sure that the problems of that are afflicting the country are resolved politically and economically. That is what is expected. And then once that is done, then I think it becomes very difficult for any group of putschists or adventurists to try to lay claim to political power, because it is not within their brief. I must say it maybe lastly, that military coups are an aberration, or it's an aberration to democracy. They cannot work. It's antithetical to democracy.
Well, thank you so much, African Affairs Analyst Chike Chude. It's always a pleasure having you on the program.
Thank you very much.
Well, we a major coalition of political parties in Mali. They are rejecting the military-dominated government's plan to extend the transition period for up to 5 years before the country returns to democratic rule. The coalition, known as the National Committee for the Salvation of the People, in a statement on Sunday said the timetable, which it describes as unilateral and unreasonable, is in violation of the Transition Charter and cannot in any way be the deep desire of the Malian people. Still to come on the program. A rare snowstorm hits the popular Red Sea resort in Egypt. Perhaps. Welcome back to the program. As Cameroon prepares to host this year's Africa Cup of Nations, security is a burning issue as authorities and operatives are on high alert. The conflict in the southwest region of the country is looming over the venue chosen to receive several African teams.
Droves of armored vehicles are patrolling the streets of Limbe in Cameroon's conflict-torn southwest region ahead of the Africa Cup of Nations football finals starting on January the 9th that separatist militants have vowed to disrupt. Cameroon is hosting the tournament in 6 cities, but security is potentially most at threat in Limbe, a city on the tropical Atlantic coast whose surrounding region has been rocked by armed attacks since war broke out in 2017.
My fear and the fear of many Limbe denizens is that the recent phenomenon of bomb blasts, which has been happening in other parts of Fako division, like in Buya, can be a common phenomenon during this AFCON period.
Insecurity is just one issue facing the tournament. Concerns about the readiness of stadiums and the spread of the Omicron COVID-19 variant have also made headlines in recent weeks. But despite the fear, some in Limbe are prepared to welcome, hopefully, many fans in the city.
With such an event, we do believe it will boom our business because so many customers will come from different areas, different towns, different countries. We'll meet so many other people that will meet new friends, make new friends. I'm very happy for the event.
Limbe's Omnisport Stadium will host matches from Group F comprising Tunisia, Mali, Mauritania and Gambia. The group's first game will be between Tunisia and Mali on January the 12th. Armed police, gendarmes and soldiers are already positioned at major intersections. Checkpoints have been set up on roads into the city.
The suspect arrested after a large fire severely damaged the Houses of Parliament in the South African city of Cape Town has been charged with arson, housebreaking and theft. The 49-year-old man, who is not a parliamentary employee, is expected to appear in court on Tuesday. He reportedly entered the building through a back window and is now expected to be charged under the National Key Points Act, which protects sites of strategic importance. On Sunday, when the fire broke out, firefighters worked for hours to extinguish the blaze. Footage from the scene showed a plume of black smoke filling the sky, with huge flames coming out from the roof of the building. Officials say the fire started on the 3rd floor offices and quickly spread to the National Assembly, the Parliament's lower house chamber. Well, joining us now is Channels TV correspondent Brian Pugeni for an update. Hello, Brian. It's been an eventful start of the year for South Africa, isn't it? I mean, with the funeral of the Archbishop Desmond Tutu and then on Sunday, the Parliament building fire. What are the latest developments?
Compliments of the new year. Well, today there was a media briefing held by the Speaker of Parliament together with the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure just to update the nation on what's going on. They're saying these experts flew into Cape Town today to come and assess the situation and the damage, but the experts could not really access the building because they're saying temperatures are still very high, over 100 degrees inside the Parliament building. Firefighters, they say, are still inside working and just checking if any of the flames will reignite. So at the moment, they are saying The experts will give a preliminary update by Friday. Hopefully by then we'll have a better update on what's going on. But what the Speaker of Parliament did say and assure the nation is that the State of the Nation address will go ahead as planned in February. They're saying the Cape Town International Convention Center could be a venue where the SONA could be held, as well as the City Hall in Cape Town. So we are waiting to see, hopefully by the end of the week, what these experts will say.
All right, let's talk about tomorrow now. The suspect, we understand he will be in court to face charges of arson, theft, and housebreaking. How do we expect tomorrow to pan out?
Well, according to the Minister and the Speaker of Parliament, they are also yet to receive a full briefing from the police. The police did brief the President yesterday when he was on site to tell him that there is a suspect who was arrested and he will appear tomorrow in court, but it's still under investigation. The Hawks, the special unit, are the ones who are investigating that. So tomorrow we'll most probably just hear the opening credits of what really is going on, but Hawks and the police are saying they're still investigating. It might be a while to really hear the full charges of this man.
All right then. Thank you so much, Brian Pugeni. Usually a warm winter destination for European tourists, Egypt's Red Sea resort of Hurghada was blanketed in snow on Saturday, January 1st. The new year brought a rare snowfall to Egypt's usually sunny town. Sleet and snow blanketed the streets, leaving them almost deserted as people stayed indoors. The Ras Gareb Hurghada motorway along the Red Sea had to be closed temporarily because of the bad weather, and that created long queues of traffic. Well, Egypt is preparing to move its inmates to a new rehabilitation center. On a visit to the newly opened prison complex, journalists are taking on a tour of the facility, which has been equipped with sports courts, classrooms, and centers for arts and crafts.
Egypt has launched a correctional and rehabilitation center in the city of Badr. The 88-acre center is due to take in inmates from 3 public prisons that are currently in the process of being closed down. Authorities view the recent steps as a reflection of progress and modernization.
The Ministry of Interior's efforts have kicked off throughout various legislative and executive levels in order to reform the concept of prisons, turning them into correctional and rehabilitation centers, a model that reflects the extent of progress and modernization.
The center will take in prisoners serving short-term sentences and is equipped with 3 rehabilitation units, a medical center, a mosque, a church, a courthouse, a courtyard, as well as a nursery for women living with their infants. Badr City's center is one of several similar institutions in the making amid what authorities say are nationwide prison reforms, the largest of which is the rehabilitation center in Wadi Natrum, a giant complex meant to house inmates of 12 different prisons, including Cairo's notorious Liman Tora.
Today, we witnessed the launch or the opening of the Correctional and Rehabilitation Center in Badr City, in parallel to closing of 3 prisons. We are talking about changing the ideas relating to the punishment establishment in Egypt, turning it from a prison to a correctional and rehabilitation center, from a prisoner to a resident, from the negative image of someone who committed a crime to a citizen that's being prepared and rehabilitated in these centers.
Egypt in October lifted its nationwide state of emergency for the first time in years. It also launched a national strategy for human rights and re-established a National Council for Human Rights following a 4-year hiatus.
And that's it on the program today. Thank you for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke. Happy New Year.